Comedian and online commentator Russell Brand is facing a second police investigation regarding allegations of sexual misconduct. According to reporting from the BBC, Thames Valley Police confirmed they were contacted 2 weeks ago by a woman with, quote, new information on reports of, quote, harassment and stalking by Brand.
According to the BBC, the woman reported her allegations to the police numerous times between 2018 and 2022, but no further action was taken. Brand apparently made counter-harassment allegations back against this woman in 2017, but that also went nowhere. The comedian has denied the sexual misconduct accusations made against him. This is difficult because, as we've discussed repeatedly on the show, I think it can be both true that certain kinds of accusations are being resurfaced now, in part because of the mainstream media's frustration that Russell Brand has so much success on an independent show where he's not beholden to corporate advertisers, where he's not beholden to public opinion that is crafted and shaped by the mainstream media in the same ways that mainstream pundits are. And it can be true that the underlying accusations might be true, or that he has himself admitted to bad behavior in his past for which he's been apologetic. Whether or not he's done enough to make up for his past behavior that he's described as misogynistic, that's for the victims and for the public to decide. But then there's this other question that remains of whether or not the British government should be applying pressure via letter campaigns against social media companies to demonetize him and or deplatform him, and whether or not this is the fact that this appears to be politically motivated should be a cause for concern, because many, many people have done bad things in their past, but is there only a consequence for it when they are saying things that are also perhaps useful and then in the public interest and against what the corporate gatekeepers usually allowed to be said?
Yeah, I kind of feel, essentially the exact same way about it, which is that the process should play out, the investigation should take place. If these are found to be true, then, individuals can pull their support from Russell Brand's show. They can stop subscribing, stop watching. If there's criminality involved, they can pursue that in the justice system. But until then, he of course has the presumption of innocence and should not be, the British government should not be encouraging Rumble to take down his videos and encouraging them to censor him. The fact that it's coming from a government entity is the most concerning part. But even on a private level, it's, I think, against a culture of free speech to weaponize simply allegations and accusations against someone. And I think you're right that the timing of these is very suspect. That doesn't mean that they're not true, but it does raise questions about the weaponization more generally, I think, of sexual harassment and sexual misconduct and assault allegations that we saw during the Me Too movement, where it went probably 10 steps too far, and now the pendulum is swinging back in the other direction. It's hard to say much more at this point without the full range of evidence with these accusations. I will say the one thing that gave me pause was in the Times' initial reporting of this. And I think I said previously on the show that it was the New York Times, and it's because I was reading the Times, and in AP style, in the US, we simplify New York Times to Times, but it's the London Times. And in that report, they said that they had actually reviewed the medical records of one of the women who claimed that she was raped by Russell Brand, and she had gone to a rape crisis center and had those tests done immediately following the alleged assault. The fact that they reviewed those documents, to me, is probably the most damning part of the report, but still obviously not a smoking gun, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and again, there are these aspects of the claims that aren't contested. It's not contested that he had a relationship, for instance, with a 16-year-old. That is legal in the UK, but people like Megyn Kelly have taken the position that they find it to be morally repugnant regardless, and might withdraw their own support of Russell Brand or decline to talk to him or engage with him going forward because they find that behavior to be repugnant. And I think that's completely fair. I think it's also fair to want to have a conversation about what it means to have transgressed like that in the past, for a public to consider what it means to move forward, if it's possible or desirable for there to be any kind of penance or absolution when people conduct themselves in ways that fall short of criminal penalties. the fact of jail existing, I think, makes it so that we as a society never have to consider what it means for a person to have made a really serious mistake. Does that mean that they're out of society forever? Do we want to operate that way? If there is no incentive to rehabilitate, will people want to rehabilitate and make amends? You know, if you're going to live on the outside forever, does that incentivize people just to double down and say, yeah, I'm going to do all this? I mean, like, what do we really want our society to look like? And I do think, and I've said this before, I do think that the punitive nature of some of the Me Too vibes that we ended up with after that movement was because people were so frustrated that absent criminal penalties, there seemed to be no penalty whatsoever. And that's why we get this ratcheting up of a desire to cancel people, like to deplatform people, to try to pressure the government to deplatform people. And I actually think that you would get a better outcome if people took more seriously what it meant to socially criticize and then rehabilitate people, as opposed to trying to lean on the government, whether it's through the actual criminal justice system or through these pressure campaigns that the British government is now putting on Russell Brand, to do what society won't do, is to have this serious conversation. What does it mean? Like, how should we interact with people who have transgressed in really serious ways, not trying to minimize that at all?
Yeah. No, I hear you 100%. And I'm very troubled by the lack of grace and forgiveness in modern society generally. And I think one of the complicating factors in so many of these cases is the time difference between when the transgressions occurred and when they're brought to light publicly. It's a lot easier for someone to make the case that they've done the rehabilitation or they're very sorry for what they did when it happened 10, 15 years ago, and for the public to respond and say, I've been watching you for the past 10 years, and I agree, I haven't seen you behave this way. And that often leaves the victims or alleged victims feeling like they didn't get the justice that they deserved. And it's difficult because I see both sides having a point there. As someone who's been through the cancel culture ringer multiple times, including for things that I tweeted in high school, which I think is patently absurd, but I apologize for it. And my apology was not met with thank you for that, or, obviously I wasn't looking for immediate absolution. But instead it was met with, well, you're clearly not sorry because you're still conservative, or you're clearly not sorry because you only made your apology when these things became public. And that kind of response, I think you're right, does lead to people feeling the need to either double down. It can lead to people who are on the fringes of society becoming more radicalized.
Yeah, I think that does it.
And there does need to be, I think, more grace extended to people, especially when they've clearly not engaged in that behavior again or made actual steps to absolve for what they've done. Yeah,
that's the thing. Russell Brand, actually, counter to your example of yourself, he actually has been relatively straightforward. I don't know if he's actually talked specifically about the rape accusation from 2012, but he's been fairly straightforward about how ashamed he is of his past behavior toward women and the role that his addiction played in some of his behavior. And that, again, is not to say that he shouldn't be responsible. There are plenty of people who are addicts who also never assault women or never accused of assaulting people or things like that. But contrary to the example of someone who might only apologize when they're under the microscope, he has taken it upon himself to try to rehabilitate his image as part of his journey in sobriety.
That's true.
And that's not to say he's been a perfect person all these years. I mean, I think Michael and I were joking about how many people were critical of how he broke up with Katy Perry in a text message and ended their marriage right before she was going to go on stage. I mean, you can still fault him for, I think, plenty of things, but, is there any kind of sense that there might be more of a case to extend grace in this situation as opposed to some others? I think so. And I do wonder what Russell Brand might say differently in this situation in terms of speaking honestly about the things he's been accused of. If the framing weren't, we got to get this guy off of air. And if he admits to it, that's even more reason to get him off of air. And if it were instead, allowing the victims to come forward in a safe space where maybe they don't have to be anonymous, because also they're not being targeted, which is a thing that happens to victims, and actually be able to articulate what they want out of Russell Brand. What do the victims want in all of this? And if it's the case that they just want to weaponize the real trauma that they experienced to help get Russell Brand off the air, well, then I'm not sympathetic to that.
Right.
If they want criminal penalties, as some of these people seem to want, then let's let that take its course. But if they want something more personalized, an explanation and real absolution, and for him to maybe give money to certain kind of charities.
Or a direct apology. Yeah.
A direct apology, exactly. Then I would like there to be space for that. And given how all of this is being weaponized, it just honestly doesn't feel like there's a space for any of that.
Yeah, I mean, what troubles me so much about not just this case, but many of the Me Too cases was that there wasn't really care for the victim at all. It really was about using media platforms, using the arm of government, using big tech censorship as a tool of control. And the people who were coming forward with these very haunting and horrible stories were just a useful tool in that endeavor. They were being manipulated and used as well. And not in every case, but I can't recall anything maybe after like the Mark Halperin NBC News report that a victim came forward and they were actually the center of the experience.
Well, look, Harvey Weinstein is in jail. Bill Cosby is in jail. Like, there were consequences.
Right.
And someone like Louis C.K., who gets, I think, framed as one of the people who were unfairly canceled because I think the nature of his bad behavior was much less than someone like Weinstein. Like, he didn't rape somebody. He did repeatedly expose himself for reasons that really boggle the mind. Like, it's insane behavior and certainly an HR violation and really problematic. I mean, part of the story that goes untold here is that these people behave this way largely with public knowledge, but without any consequences until the victims were able to create enough of a sense of solidarity along with the media that it bubbled over. And who's going to be responsible for everyone who kept Harvey Weinstein's secrets and who kept Louis C.K.'s secrets and kind of allowed that to happen as well? Barack Obama was sending his daughter off to intern for Harvey Weinstein at a time where apparently it was an open secret that he was behaving this way. And so I think that's part of what's going on here too. It's like the gatekeepers of when the secret comes out and has consequences versus when it doesn't seem to be the same people that are, one, allowing the abuse to continue, and in this case, suddenly interested in the abuse only because it's useful to the project of deplatforming Russell Brand, which is, you're right, a complete perversion of what it means to find justice for people who legitimately are being slighted here.
That's exactly my point, is that this is a disservice to victims. Because not only are you weaponizing accusations for political reasons, but you also make people so defensive that you make it more difficult for real accusations to be taken seriously because people start to view these as a tool of censorship.
Yeah, but that's true. I think that's absolutely true. I hope that to the extent that there's real victims here, they're able to get past some of this, because I do think it's in some ways harder for people to be taken seriously the more victims' claims are weaponized by bad faith actors. So I don't think this story is going anywhere, and neither will we. Tomorrow on Rising, we'll be back with more news of the day, but sadly, without Amber. You'll be taking some well-deserved time off.
Yes, wedding then honeymoon, so I'll be out for a few weeks.
Many congratulations. I'll be sending positive energy out into the universe for you as you're going through this exciting week. But you guys come back and be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who prefer to listen while you're on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. Bye-bye.
See you next time.